Hi there, and welcome to the Skylight Books author reading series. If you'd like to learn more about us and our many upcoming author events, please visit skylightbooks.com, where you can browse our inventory, buy books, and join our Friends with Benefits Club. You can also follow us on Twitter, Tumblr, and Facebook. To speak to a real live bookseller like me, please call 323-660-1175. Thanks for your support, and enjoy.
Today, we're welcoming Ingrid Rojas Contreras, the author of Fruit of the Drunken Tree, which is what we're here to celebrate. A Barnes & Noble Discover, great new writer's pick. She was born and raised in Bogotá, Colombia. Her essays and short stories have appeared in Nylon, the LA Review of Books, Electric Literature, Guernica, Huffington Post, among others. She currently teaches writing to immigrant high school students as part of a San Francisco Arts Commission initiative, bringing artists into public schools. Might ask about that, I don't know. I'd like to hear more. And she's also known for her work as a book columnist for KQED, the Bay Area NPR affiliate. And joining Ingrid is Lilliam Rivera, who lives here in LA, and she's an award-winning writer and author of the young adult novel Dealing in Dreams, which is forthcoming from Simon & Schuster in March of this year, and The Education of Margot Sanchez, which has already been released. We have that up at the front, along with Ingrid's book, of course. And her work has appeared in Lenny Letter, Tin House, Los Angeles Times, and Fantasy and Science Fiction magazine. Please join me in welcoming these two writers.
Hey guys, thanks for coming. Oh, this situation. Okay. Yes. You're going to read first, right? Thank you so much for coming out on a Saturday. You know, the moon, what's up? Are we ready? Something's going to be revealed today. I don't know what.
Are we feeling it? I'm feeling it.
Okay, so Ingrid, you're going to read a bit. I'm super excited to hear you read.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much for coming out. We'll get, the full moon is going to be okay. This is what I'm telling myself. This is my debut novel. I worked on it for about 6 years, and it just came out last summer. It's a story that happens in Colombia, in Bogotá, and there are two girls who are living through the 90s. And it's a dangerous time. So I'm going to read to you from one of their point of views. Okay. So this is Chula. All day we waited for Papa. Mama yelled he was on his way, stop asking. I turned on the television. Everything on the television was about Pablo Escobar. There was a banner of text running at the bottom of the screen. Breaking news, the biggest manhunt in history. A reporter was saying Pablo Escobar had escaped and that he had not been in a high-security prison as the government wanted the country to believe, but he had been living in a high-security mansion. He's free. He can come to Bogotá. Chula, hold on a minute. I'm trying to listen, Mama said. Every channel on the television was showing specials. Reporters stood inside the high-security prison, showing off the water beds, jacuzzis, fine carpets, marble tiles, the sauna, the bar with the discotheque, the telescopes, radio equipment, and so many weapons. Grenades, machine guns, pistols, machetes. He had been running the cartels from prison. Finally, we found the channel that was talking about the details of the escape. There was an animated map of the prison. The prison was nested in the hilly mountainside of Medellin. Little army men swept to surround the building. The reporter said that since the prison guards were all Pablo Escobar's men, the escape was easy. Pablo Escobar and his men were thought to have escaped at the hour of the fog. That's because they slipped unseen past the battalions surrounding the prison, and since up in the hills a heap of women's clothes was later discovered, it was thought that Pablo Escobar and his men went out into the mountains in disguise, a row of ladies walking into the clouds. When it was dusk, Mama said Papa was late because of traffic. Then she said maybe there had been a landslide. I thought of car accidents, hospitals, women in distress, hitchhikers. My sister Cassandra asked, "What did he say exactly when you talked to him, Mama?" Mama shrugged. "He said he was leaving right away. He was going to get his bag and drive home." The television droned on in the background. Pablo Escobar this, Pablo Escobar that. I huddled with Mama on the couch. Night fell. It began to rain. I was falling asleep when Mama rose to her feet and went about the house moving things from one table to another. Her bathrobe ballooned about her as she bent and picked things up from the floor. She dropped a dictionary into a cabinet drawer and said, "His car probably broke down on the highway." Mama scrubbed her face with her hands. For the first time, I noticed the color. Her forehead was white, but her cheekbones and overlip glistened in a sickly green. I tried to imagine Papa's car breaking down. Then I imagined Papa bursting through the front windshield of his car in an accident. I averted my eyes, but the image was there. The tips of my ears tingled. "Go to sleep," Mama said. "I'll wake you when your father comes." "I want to wait, Mama." "I'm sure he's fine. Go and I'll wake you." I went to the attic and crawled into bed next to Cassandra, the patter of rain over the world of our dreams. The next day downstairs, Mama was still smoking in the living room, and the television was emitting a loud, continuous beep, showing a static image of color bars. "Mama," Cassandra was saying, shaking her shoulder, "Mama, did Papa come?" Mama narrowed her eyes until they closed. She sucked her cigarette, swallowing the smoke, then it came forked out of her nostrils. Cassandra shook her again. Mama's eyes broke open. "What is it? Did Papa call? What time is it?" "It's 7. Mama sat up and put out her cigarette in the ashtray. She picked up the telephone and then held it in her hand. The telephone button slided fluorescent green, and the dim sound of the dial tone filled the room. "Mama, why don't you dial?" "I'm thinking." "Mama, dial. What are you waiting for?" But the color drained from her. She was looking into the distance as she replaced the receiver. Then she was on her feet, braiding her fingers at the nape of her head, and then she was sitting against the wall, hiding her face between her knees. "It will be okay. Your papa is okay," she called after a while. Her voice built a new anxiety in me. The police in Medellin found a Pablo Escobar hideout. The reporter was standing fully dressed in the shower, showing how a young cop, who for no reason wondered whether the apartment bought with laundered money had running water, had turned the shower knob. What happened next was that the shower wall swung out like a door, and there, below a few steps, was a small apartment. The reporter motioned for the cameras to come in. He flicked on a switch. Everything was in disarray. There was a bed. Here, you may imagine, the subject of the biggest manhunt in history peacefully slept while the police searched the apartment. The reporter lifted a coffee cup left on the nightstand. When police first entered, this coffee was still warm. The room was empty and the police left to search the vicinity, but little did they know, the reporter said. Walking to a wall where he pulled on a cord, there was another hideout within the hideout. A small door swung out like a door. A small swung out from the wall and revealed a tight crawl space. Pablo Escobar probably sat here, literally a hairbreadth away from the authorities, biding his time to sneak away. The telephone rang all day, but Mama holed up in her bedroom with her door shut, so I stayed with the television. At night, Mama turned into a black widow. Her bed was stripped, and the pillows and blankets were on the floor. I found her sitting directly on the mattress. The firelight of the candle clasped between her thighs threw a satin sheen on her hair, and her contorted fingers radiated orange shadows. Her cheekbones and forehead glistened, but her eyes hung back. She was braiding the air with her fingers, mumbling prayers. When I touched her, her body crumbled under my fingers as if it were ash. She curved by the candle, crying. Bowled over, she rocked on her thighs and howled. It was a pained, low, guttural howl. It washed through my entire body. Everything was terrible. I howled as well. My eyes sprang with tears and my sight doubled. Mama, with 4 hands, covering her face, saying, "What are we going to do, Chula? What in the world are we going to do?" Thank you.
My God, I don't know about you guys, but I was like on the verge of tears. Like, it's like so If you guys haven't read this, it's so powerful, and I'm
you.
really happy that I got to hear you read it.
Thank you.
So, like you mentioned before, before we even start, Liz, can we just talk about how like Sandra Cisneros and Julia Alvarez blurbed your book?
That was amazing. I felt like I had won some kind of lottery, and the next day there was going to be, I was going to be struck by lightning. And that was going to be it.
It was like the reinas. They were just like, I'm blessing you now, and now you could have your quinceañera, and that's it. Like, you're like done. Like, I just felt like, yeah, but it makes sense, right? Because this is like as epic as anything that they would have written as well.
Thank you.
Okay, so Fruit of the Drunken Tree is told by, like you mentioned, the alternating points of view. You have the 77-year-old Chula, who lives in this gated community, right, with her parents and her older sister in Colombia. And then there's Petrona, and she's 13 years old, and she comes to live with them as their live-in-maid. Okay, can you walk us through, to me, like, what was the first image you had when you started writing this novel? Who came to you first?
So yeah, the very first scene that I wrote was so Chula and her sister are in front of their house in the, what's that called, porch?
Oh yeah.
In the porch of their house, and they're watching as Petrona arrives for the first time, and it's this moment where there was a lot of tension in that moment, and I felt the class and kind of like the gap between these two experiences, and they're like looking at each other, kind of trying to suss each other out, and the girls are kind of very taken with this slightly older girl who, as young girls they are generally very taken with older girls, but then they know that she lives in a settlement, which is where most displaced people in Colombia would live, in a settlement. So they know that about her, and they know that she comes from a very different life experience, and that moment of them kind of seeing each other was where it first started for me.
My thing with that was always for me like shocking was the reminder of how young Petrona is, because she's only 13, but she is like basically the savior of this family. She's and she's forced to make these kind of like huge decisions that affect everything about her life, right? But my thing is that I feel like all of the women in your story, Chula and the mother Alma and Petrona, are making these I would say sometimes flawed decisions, just trying to save the family. What was it that you wanted to kind of, that struggle between them? Because there is definitely, from the get, we're talking about class, but there is something that unifies all of these women, that they're struggling to claims, make sure that their family survives no matter what.
I think I was thinking a lot about what survival, and in South America, like with Petrona's family. So her family were farmers before, but they lost their land because of the altercations between guerrillas and paramilitary. So they lost their land, they were displaced, they came to the city, and then she's the only person in her family that can work, and she has younger brothers that live in the house with her, and this is true of things that I observed in Colombia, where like even if a woman is slightly older and she's like more capable, her younger brothers would still be considered the men in the house. And they would still be considered to have more power than her. So that was, like I was always thinking about Petrona in that sense, like how does she surviving? And for Alma, there's different but similar social things happening, where she's a very strong woman, and she's very opinionated, but she's shackled by what it means to be a mother, and what it means to be a mother in South America in the 90s. while her husband goes to work and she's just there at home, and kind of like having all that potential and then trying to make the best decisions that she can. And yeah, everyone is not making the right choice.
I feel like for all of them, they're kind of trying to break away from the roles that they're meant to have. So there's those moments with Petrona who you realize that she just wants to have a boyfriend. You know, like she's like, oh, there's an attention of someone, you know, even if that attention later on is revealed to be something else. But still, there's those moments of like, I'm going to break the role that is supposed to be meant for me. I'm supposed to take care of the family. I'm supposed to work here. But that also goes with Alma. And that's what I love. Like, I found that really fascinating, was that Alma and Petrona are both trying to break down the roles that they're meant to have.
Yeah, that was something that I grew up around my mother and just all my aunts, and it felt like such a sacred place to be. And one of there's one story about my mom that I think about constantly, and I think I was thinking about that story while writing the book, and even after writing the book, like I still think about this story. But when she was a little girl, my grandmother would tell her, you have to wash your brother's clothes, and her brothers were older than she was, maybe like 7 years older. And she would tell her, my grandmother would tell my mother, so when they come to dinner, you like serve them first, and then you can sit down and eat. And when they're finished, like you pick up their dishes and then you wash them. So she was getting instructed into doing all of these things. And what she thought at the time, she was like 9 years old. She thought like, well, my muscles are so much smaller. Like, why should I do all this labor when they seem more capable? But so my grandmother wasn't hearing any of that, and she gave my mom a beating. So the next day it was like the same thing. It's like, okay, wash your brother's clothes, pick up the dishes. And so my mother said no again. And she was thinking, like, if I say no enough times, like, one of us is going to give up and it's not going to be me. But so she was beat up again. And the second beating was so bad that the next day, the third day, she was like, okay, I need new approach. And she walked into the kitchen and she got a pair of scissors, and then she cut her hair as close to her head as possible.
Wow.
And then she walked up to my grandmother and she said, I'm a boy now, I don't have to do any of the things that you say.
God, yes. That is amazing.
So my grandmother was so surprised by this whole thing that she was like, okay, I will not make you do. Clearly you're different. Like you've somehow outwitted the system and I'm not sure how.
So this is the stuff that you're invoking.
Exactly,
in your, yes, I totally understand that. I went through the same thing, but I was not going to cut my hair, or I just served whoever had to be served. The thing about with Alma, and we'll talk about Petrona next, but is that they're living in this gated community, but they're not really kind of accepted in this community at all. You would think like they're the outsiders in this community. Can you talk just a little bit about that? Like,
yeah, so the family has they come from a poor background, and then they're living in this middle class gated community. And when I was growing up in South America, there's the way that people treat each other it's the class is underlined so much, and it kind of reflects also in the color of your skin. So even if everyone is generally brown, it's like I'm slightly, white, more white than you. So that means that my ancestors were better, and basically your ancestors were slaves. And so there's a lot of that. And people in the neighborhood for this family, they're constantly, saying things about her, like, how did she get out of poverty? Like, she must have slept her way out of it. I'm sure that she's like a former prostitute that we have like living with us. in this community. So that's what she has to contend with.
Now, Petrona, I mean, you read any, like, her voice, her point of view, her story, it just kind of breaks your heart, right? But what I so appreciated about the way you wrote her is that, yes, she's coming from poverty, and you're very detailed with when it comes to the things that, you know, her lifestyle and all those things, but there's never a moment when you write about that it becomes like a caricature, or that you're either explaining it to it, like you're bringing in, you know, those of people who've never been there. This is like, you know, the safari tour, right? Like, it's not, you're not doing that. You give it really hard. And just, how is it that you were able to write it? Because I sometimes there's that balance, like I'm always writing about class, but I don't want to fall into these kind of cliches, you know.
So I think it maybe came from, well, there were two things. My extended family, well, both my parents come from very poor backgrounds. So I grew up middle class in Bogotá, but when we took vacation, we would go back and see their families. And it was just so different than our lives. You know, my grandmother always had dirt floors, but it was so joyful and beautiful and amazing at the same time, in a way that our lives in Bogotá were not. So I think I traveled between those two things a lot. And then when I was growing up, you know, some of the experiences in the book were based on things that happened. And so the character of Petrona is based on a few women. And so my mother would always take in young girls who had been displaced, and they would live with us, and they would be our nanny, and they would do maid's work. And it was just so just shocking to be growing up, and you're going about your middle class life, like you're trying to go to school and get good grades, and thinking about how you're going to make a living, and, you know, trying to figure that out. And then someone living in the house with you, they're living like a day-to-day emergency, you know. And that was just, it was just shocking to me. And I would spend a lot of time with them, and we went to visit them all the time. And so I did experience like what I did see, what those differences were. But I think I never got over how stark it is.
There's something like that's unique too when I think about like Petrona, or having someone live in your house like that. For me, like growing up, you know, we always had fake cousins who end up living with you because we were, you know, we lived in New York, so they were coming from Puerto Rico, and it was this moment of like these strangers, strange men, like, and becomes like this kind of like, what's their history about, you know, you're young and you're just inventing. And I totally could relate with Chula and her kind of like her obsession with Petrona and wanting, and especially because Petrona doesn't speak for like almost for the first few chapters about it. That to me was really amazing to read about, that moment of like, even in the midst of all the sadness and the violence, there was this moment of youth and childlike and mystery with the kid. There was like adventure and mystery even in this gated community when it comes to like Chula, which I loved.
Yeah, that was one thing that I really wanted to capture as I was thinking back about what it was like for me to grow up in this time in Colombia. Like we used to play, you know, like kids here play like cops and robbers. We would play Pablo Escobar and cops. And we knew all kinds of morbid details about the things that he would do, and we would like incorporate it into our game. And there was a way in which, when you're surrounded by so many things, if you're a kid, you just kind of absorb it and then turn it into this plaything, and you don't stop having those childlike joys. They just become like slightly more disturbing childlike joys.
Just slightly different games.
Yeah.
Okay, so obviously you mentioned Pablo Escobar, and everyone like America is so obsessed with this story. I mean, you look at Netflix, it's like, what more, another movie? Like, it's like, how many times? And I am obsessed, like, I definitely watch Narcos, like, obsessed. But, okay, so this is the thing I wanted to ask about. My thing about in your novel, Escobar kind of permeates these women's lives, but he's like, ultimately, he's a ghost, right? And I felt that in a way, so is Chula's father.
Yeah.
Is a ghost. Okay, so what are you trying to say about these men who are like not there really, but permeate and just sort of like take over,
Yeah, I think part of it is that I just love women so much that when I was writing the book, I was like, yeah, but what do the women really think? And like, what are the women really doing? And the other part of it is that I think I wanted to explore how at least in Colombia, like the world is built by men. Like the power structures and all the rules are put there by men. And then you have women who have to contend with it. So to me, that was a more interesting story. I think we've had so many stories about, what did Pablo Escobar think? And was he a good person? Was he a bad person? That it's just not interesting to me. I'm more interested in how do, centering women and how do women survive that?
So can you share what was the hardest scene for you to write? And if you don't want to write, and if you don't want to share it, then tell me what was the easiest. No, I'm kidding. No.
I think, without
like spoiling, right?
Yeah. I don't know how to, okay. Well, one I'll change because then I'll spoil. I can't do that one. But one revealing part was the hardest part. But the other
the other part that was second hardest
was, I would say, the ending. Endings were, I think they, I personally want the ending of a novel to both reflect everything that's happened before, to close the story, to have symmetry to the beginning, and to also point to a future that is untold. So I wanted all of that in one line.
Yeah, that's
and
easy.
I was rewriting the last line up until the very last moment. Like I already had, it was right before, like all the copy edits had been done, and I was still like telling my editor, like, hold on, I can get it.
Wow.
And I just remember just like pouring myself like a big glass of wine, like drink it and all, and then just reading the last chapter and then pausing at the last moment before the last line. And then it just came to me and it felt so good.
Okay.
Like just finally. But I was, searching for that line since, the very first draft of the book.
Do you have an idea of how you want to end your novel?
No, I don't. No, I usually, because I like the process of discovery more. But once I had that first draft and I knew what the skeleton was, then I start to make plans and.
This is a quote that you said in an interview recently, and I want to talk about the work that you're doing with the immigrant kids too. I feel like we were both talking about because we're doing similar things with young people. But and I love this. You said, I think that the stories where someone can move clouds or can read the future, or maybe someone like the girl in my novel is forced into doing an act because she is threatened and her family is threatened. All those things almost don't have room to breathe. I think immigration and stories of other cultures force that oxygen. Yes. Yes, let's get into that quote. I forgot where it's from. I'm sorry. I should have attributed it. But talk to me about the work that you're doing with these young kids. And I love that because I feel like that's my way of like, even though I complain about having to, I have to go hang out with these kids. And as soon as I get there, I get filled. I get like the fillness. Like, I'm like, I'm supposed to be doing this.
I get you. I mean, high school students are a lot. They're a lot. But it was right after the election, and I felt this urgency to do something, and I just wrote this. There was a city grant that was coming up, and I wrote the grant as quickly as I could, and I got some partnerships going with a high school. It like within 2 weeks, like it was crazy that I was able to do it. But I just really felt that, you know, what is the most, when it comes to stories, like what's the most vulnerable population in that? And to me, it's like the kids who are seeing all of that play out in the news, and maybe they don't have someone who is telling them like your story matters and like how you got here matters, and you know you have a place here. So I really wanted to do that, and when I go in, I've done collaborations with artists, and one of the things that the students really liked that we did last year is so there's this Trump had like a executive order that was banning sanctuary cities. So we took this order, and then we had the kids do erasure poetry with it, so that maybe you could turn it into the opposite executive order, or you could turn it into how you feel about being an immigrant. There was one student who was able, with the title and with all the text, he turned that executive order and it into saying Latinos are afraid of Trump. So then we printed the executive order on these wooden panels, and then they taped over the words that they wanted to keep and painted over the rest.
Oh, nice.
And so then when they peeled back the tape, it was both a painting and a poem, and we had an exhibition, and we, you know, got them a gallery show in the city. And it felt really powerful, you know, that they could walk into a gallery and have their poems kind of like elevated in this way. And it was right by Civic Center, so a lot of city official people were coming to see that too. And it just feels like such important oxygen.
Yeah.
Like I want to bring that into, I want to, you know, if nobody else is providing that space, and I want to force that space into happening.
I love that so much, and I totally agree. Like it's like even the simplest thing of poetry, or just let's write a short story about monsters, and it always comes up who's the monster that they're gonna write about, you know, and it. But there's also joy. There's also like jokes, and you know. So yeah, I love that. So I have a really important question, and then we're gonna have everyone ask a question. Are you a fan of Bad Bunny, and what is your favorite song? No, I'm kidding. Okay, that's not the question. My question is, have you seen Alfonso Cuarón's Roma?
Yes.
And what is your hot take? I actually hate the word hot take, but I wanted to use it. No, I'm kidding. Did you watch it?
I did watch it. I thought it was beautiful. It was a beautiful film. I felt that I felt like it was all from his point of view, and I didn't feel like he quite honored the indigenous point of view, the maid in the house. Like he didn't quite get what that was, and yet he was still trying to write that.
Yes.
So that was a little bit of a letdown for me.
Yeah.
Gorgeous though.
Yeah.
But disappointing.
Okay. All right. So before we start, I read that you're working on a memoir. Is that?
Yeah.
Okay. So tell me a little bit.
So I'm working on a memoir, and it's about my grandfather, who was a curandero, and that's a faith healer. And so people used to say that he had the power to move clouds.
Yes.
And then so he was supposed to pass the knowledge down, because it had been passed to him, you know, from generations of fathers. But he didn't have a son that was suitable for that. So he kept saying, like, none of my sons have the testicles to be a curandero. So the only person that he thought could do it was my mother. But because she's a woman, he couldn't do it. Like something bad would happen. But then she had this accident where she lost her memory, and when she recovered it after 8 months, she could hear voices and she could see ghosts. So then the family was like, oh, the gifts came to her anyway, even if he didn't teach her. And then I had an accident where I lost my memory. But when I came back to, I couldn't do any of the fancy things that she could.
I was going to say, wait a minute. So then what happened?
So then the whole family was just very disappointed that I couldn't tell the future. But so it's a story about family and inheritance and a lot of magical things that I interviewed people that saw magical things happen.
And so, I mean, you're, obviously fiction, but then you're writing memoir. I mean, are you nervous about family reading it? I feel like whenever I'm like, yes, you're in the book. It's fiction, but you're definitely in it. Buy it.
I wonder if Latino families are just more extroverted and they're just more into this idea. Because they love it. They're like, yeah, let me tell you more about myself. Hold on, let me tell you the good part, Just constantly feeding me stories.
Like more stories that you can put in there. That's amazing. Okay, so let's open it up for some questions. You guys want to ask? Well, I'll keep asking. I'll talk. Look. No, if you guys have any questions for Ingrid or yes.
Yeah, so there is a translation by Guillermo Arreola, who's from Mexico. So because it was translated into Mexican Spanish, I did take a look and tried to make it more Colombian. But it was a crazy experience because when I wrote the book, I was intent on being in this space where I was between languages. And I was watching a lot of CNN at the time, and how they have those interpreters. They hear one language and they speak in another immediately. So I really wondered, like, what is going on in your brain when you're doing that? So while I was writing this book, I was pretending to be my own CNN interpreter. So I would hear and I would imagine the story in Spanish, and then I would type it in English. So sometimes there's a little bit of strangeness in the language, and it's because I'm doing this weird thing with it. But reading the translation was a trip because at times it felt like I had done, like, this is maybe a translation, and so then to read a translation of the translation, it just like messed. Yeah. It just gave me a headache. So it was really hard to go through it and to make suggestions, but I did. And then it's coming out in Colombia later this year, which I'm very nervous about because I don't know how they're gonna react.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
I think, our unemployment rate is so high that there's not any jobs. So for a long time, it just has been like one of the few jobs that specifically women can do when, if you're pulled out of high school because you have to support your family, like that is the job that's there for you. We are still, I think unemployment is getting better, but then the distance between classes, I think, is the same, if not worse. So I think that's still a reality.
You mentioned it took you 6 years, correct? Right? So what did that 6 years look like? Was it kind of writing for a year and then taking a break and then coming back to it, or?
So I wrote through the whole book in 1 year, And then I took the second year to do insanely compulsive research. So I'm a Virgo, so that's why. But I wanted to just really do my homework, and I read every issue of the newspaper in Colombia from 1989 to 1995. And then I read a bunch of Pablo Escobar books. And then I decided that in order to fully do my research, I needed to know what the weather was through the years of the novel.
My God.
So then I logged onto the weather database and clicked through every day of and then when I did all that, a year had gone by. But I was like, now I am ready to do the second draft.
Understandable.
And then after that, so then I tried to incorporate all that kind of political research into the book, and I rewrote all those kind of historical juicy parts into it. And then I did edits with my agent, and we sold it. And then with the editor, I did more edits.
It takes time.
It takes a lot of time.
Okay. Who else has a question? Yes. Sure.
I'm just curious, this is based more on a personal impression, but you're right that in Colombia there's a lot of attention obviously on political history of Escobar, et cetera, et cetera. But at least my impression, really just based on one family connection, is that a lot of family stories are not often told. There's a real silence about that. So I wonder if that's true in your family as well, and if in some sense you're writing this personal story about some of the traumatizing effects of living in that era as a reflection of that.
Yeah, I think that is mostly true. I just wonder if, my family might be very different. Like there's this saying, when somebody tells you a secret, if you're good at keeping secrets, you're like a tomb. And then if you're not good at keeping secrets, you're a tumba abierta. You're an open tomb. So my mother would always say that she's an open tomb. She's like, okay. But then she would say, okay, this secret is ultra tumba, right? So it's like beyond the tomb. But then she's like, but then I'm an open tomb, but you be an ultra tomb. So I feel like I always, and my whole family is like that. They're like, I'm not supposed to repeat this, but.
But isn't it like the story is way more important than any secret? Like, I'm going to tell you the story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in my experience, that there are silences, but at some point the silence is always broken, and it's always broken in this way. Like, you don't tell anybody, but I'm going to tell you.
I thought I saw someone else. Yes.
I love this book so much. I'm very excited for you all to read it. I'm curious just because one of the things that I found was that you kind of do this gentle guiding for people who, don't know Colombian culture or the cities. Obviously, you wrote it in English, like it's for an English-speaking or English reading audience. I'm curious how you negotiated that, or like, because it never felt kind of like, I don't know, over the top or something. But.
Yeah. That was a hard thing to navigate, I think, because when I was writing the first draft of the book, I was such a new writer that a lot of the feedback that I was getting from writer friends was who happened to be white, would be like, oh, can you explain this more, or can you translate this, or I don't know what this means exactly. And I would do that. And then, right after doing that, I just felt so uncomfortable. And I felt like I was, giving a tour. And, I think that maybe that was part of the learning for me, getting to that feeling and feeling like I am a safari guide suddenly, that you never want to feel like that again. So after kind of like, doing what they were asking of me, and then that feeling really bad, I think I used that as a compass later, so that especially later when I was going through the edits, just like looking at each part and being like, does this feel too uncomfortable for me to do? And is it okay if it's just, you know, like if you work a little hard, you can probably get it. But that was hard to navigate.
Yeah.
How was the process when you realized, like growing up in Colombia, that most of the stuff that you live in Colombia is different than other countries because you live in the middle of the country? How was the process? How did you get there?
Of,
That I can write something about
oh,
something that was normal to me.
uh-huh. I think becoming an immigrant kind of helped with that process, because when you are living in Colombia, in this time, car bombs were like routine. It was just like, oh, there's rumors that there might be car bombs over here, so just don't go in this area. It was like you were talking about traffic or something. And it's only when I arrived here as an immigrant that it was like, oh, that is not normal. Like, no, nobody is worried about, that's not a thing. Or sometimes my humor would be too dark. And it was just because I had, that's how we talk to each other. So then people would be like, that is not funny. And it was just like all these moments of realizing that something was very different, and that I had, the circumstances had made me into a very different person. And once I started to see that, then it became kind of more obvious to take this lived experience and talk about it and to write about it.
Yes.
How did you decide to be a writer?
I always loved writing, but I never thought that it was something that I could do, because I didn't know anybody who wrote books, and the books that we had at home were like, it was like communist books, it was like encyclopedias, and then it was like esoteric books. So and the things that I was reading at school would just be like all white men. So I did not see how it did not even occur to me that I could. But I still loved stories a lot. And I would write like really short stories in my diary, and I would write like incredibly long-winded descriptions of things. Like I would sit before a glass of water and be like, this glass of water. Like it would just go on. And I think my way around into writing was like, okay, I can be a journalist. Like that's the thing that people do. So I went to school for journalism, and I would often go do the reporting and do all the work and then come back. And when it would be my time to like type up the story, all I wanted to do was to make things up. So then I started to just on the side like explore what that would be, and I started to take classes, and then started to see more people, and kind of discovered Sandra Cisneros, and then I was like, that is a thing.
I feel like we had this similar upbringing, that it really wasn't like I did journalism as well. It was the only way that I was like, okay, well, at least I could try to write a story in that sense. But every time I would meet someone, it would be like, no, this is a way more fascinating story in my head. I'm like, I could make this even more, Yeah, that's awesome. What's another question, you guys? No? Oh, okay.
So, in Colombia, what are some practical resistant measures of feminists? What are some daily practices of feminists that work in the culture for advancing women where they are now?
So I think we got our wave of feminism in Colombia rather late. So we haven't had as much progress. But there are some exciting things happening now. There's the former FARC women have their own group, and the government is supposed to be helping them go back into civilian life. But I always thought that they were I'm just fascinated by the former FARC women because they, from what I've read, a lot of the times would join the guerrillas thinking that it would be an equal society because it's communism, right? So it's supposed to be an equal society. But then it, like a lot of the times it wouldn't. Like there were actually forced abortions happening. But there's a lot of centers. There's like the Center for Memory that's doing a lot of work trying to get the stories of victims told. And then there's the Center for the Center for Feminist Movement. And they're a hub that they do a lot, and they go into areas that have been upset by violence, and they do things like workshops with women who have been abused or who have been displaced. So there's that kind of thing happening.
Okay, I think we're going to do one more question, and then, you're going to get your books, and we're going to have Ingrid sign them. Yes, sorry.
Yeah, I do. It was, so losing my memory was the happiest I've ever been in my life. Because it was like suddenly you don't, like all that kind of stress and body weight that you carry, like suddenly that was gone. And I was just a grown woman with nothing but possibility.
That is amazing. Wow. Oh my God, I'm gonna remember that. Okay. Okay. All right. So I thank you so much, Ingrid, for having us.
Thank you, Lilliam.
Celebrate your book. The book is called Fruit of the Drunken Tree. Go get it. We're gonna be signing some stuff up here. And yes, it was fabulous.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Okay. Well,
Let's give them another round of applause.
You've been listening to the Skylight Books author reading series. Don't forget, you can listen to this and all of our other great podcasts at skylightbooks.com. Thanks again for stopping by, and we hope to see you soon.